Hey everyone, what is going on? What is going on? Welcome to That Man Show. My name is Curtis Brooks. I am your host, executive coach, and men's life coach, specializing in transformational leadership for men. Guys, we got yet another powerful show for you this evening. I'm super excited yet about this powerful episode because we're talking about her pain, okay, his pain, no way. Subtitle: Why Men's Suffering is Invisible and Why That's Toxic. And we are streaming on three multiple platforms. That's going to be YouTube, and of course here on LinkedIn. Our primary place where we're streaming from is here on LinkedIn, and we're sharing that stream out to two other platforms. That's going to be our Facebook page, or my personal Facebook page, under the name Curtis Brooks, and also on YouTube. So if you are having some issues finding me over on Facebook, you're absolutely welcome to go over to YouTube, my channel there, under @men's life coaching. Again, the @men's life coaching. Check us out there, and make sure you like the video and subscribe also. So again, we've got a great show for you. Her pain, okay, his pain, no way. Why men's suffering is invisible and why that's toxic. Guys, me and my wife actually did this conversation originally some time ago, and that conversation is over on our YouTube channel as well. Hey, Allison, over on LinkedIn here. Thank you for joining. Thank you, uh, Ileana. Ileana, I hope I pronounced it. Thank you for the spelling phonetically. Appreciate that. Makes it a lot easier. But definitely thank you, Ileana, over on LinkedIn, for joining us. So we've got a few more people who will be joining us late or in just a few moments here. But anyways, this conversation is yet a conversation just near and dear to my heart. I recently watched a movie called Adolescence, and it talks about the incel, a group of men who involuntarily say, "Hey, you know what? I'm not interested in sex," but they've got some other stuff going on as well. And I don't want to make this show about them, but I do want your interaction on this, guys, because I think for all of us, not only for men but for the women who love us, it's important that we cover this topic as much as possible, because this topic is not about tearing women down. It's not about tearing men down because, oh, they're feeling a certain way. No, absolutely not. It's about understanding each other. So that's the goal of this show, is to make sure that we are understanding each other, because I think the challenge is that we don't understand each other, and men and women alike. And oftentimes things get lost in communication, and that is unfortunate. But because they get lost in communication, different lifestyles, different cultures, different upbringings, and things of that nature, there is a challenge. You just had some issue with LinkedIn. There is a challenge for us to understand each other because of those different limitations. And I like to say, really, that there is a there is a empathy gap that we as people are dealing with. And I think it's interesting because not only the empathy gap, there's that double standard oftentimes that just go throughout life, and kind of like the little kid that says, oh, to his mother, or maybe telling on his brother something about something his brother did, and oh, Tommy did this, or Mike did this, or whatever the case might be. And there are those variances or variables that we deal with. But now, as adults, now we take that to a much higher level, because what happens is that, because of this empathy gap that we're all dealing with, and again, culture plays a huge piece in this empathy gap. Hey, Kelly, thank you for joining. Good evening to you. Thank you for joining over on LinkedIn. So because of culture, that's a huge gap in that this empathy, that where we should be making the connection, we're not. Uh, Not only the culture piece of it, but just again the entire upbringing, guys. It makes just for just a lot of ambiguity or something. I can't remember how to pronounce that word, but it makes for a lot of differences. I'll put it that way. But and because of those differences, it makes it easy. It makes it difficult for us to really find where the other person's at. And within this empathy gap, there is the double standards, the double standards. And so, as I stated earlier, when me and my wife first were talking, we're dating, I should say, we had these conversations. A lot of the conversations that I'm sharing with you now, me and my wife actually had this conversation. I think we did a live. I don't know if it was YouTube or Instagram, but we did a live video on this conversation. And what I discovered from this conversation that me and my wife shared had is that there was there were some stark differences. Some stark differences. My wife shared of a story where, second here, excuse me. My wife shared of a story where her and her brothers, and I think I may have shared this before, but her and her brothers were playing with her father. And I absolutely love this story for a lot of different reasons, but she was saying that her and her brother were playing wrestling, hanging out with her father, and her brother had stepped on her father's hand with his boots, and her father went, just began to shake his hand, and the tears kind of came up in his eyes because you can imagine someone stepping in your hands with a pair of boots, and just kids were just playing with their father. But nevertheless, she said it was at that moment that she seen that dad, or either her brother or herself, but at that moment, hey, Sharito, thank you for joining over on LinkedIn. So at that moment, it was that she noticed something different. Dad wasn't as strong as she seen him, as she perceived her father to be strong. And so for me, when she shared that story with me, it was absolutely powerful. At the same time, it was telling, because where could I stand up in that? For me, this is my thinking as we were dating. Where could I stand up in there? How could I position myself in this story that she was sharing? Because even though this was many, many years ago, as she was saying, when they were young kids playing, it was still something she shared with me, and it's still something that was heavy on her heart. Again, heavy enough to share it with me, and because of that, it made me think. It had me to think about, whoa, how can I live up to this? And most of us as men, we're having to live up to the old adages, man up. You're a man. Boys aren't supposed to do such and such. Boys aren't supposed to cry. Boys aren't supposed to do this, and things of that nature. And unfortunately, that has driven most of us into uh, a corner, if you will. And I did a post some maybe months ago, or maybe more than a year ago now, how that those phrases that most of us as young boys have heard, it's essentially painted us in a corner. And because we're painted in a corner with no door or no way out, we're having to live up to this standard. We're having to live up to the very things that we've been told. And I often like to say, especially as it relates to the spiritual piece of life, I like to say that the the enemy, he he brings things, he offers suggestions, and we know that from the Bible, because at the very beginning he offered a suggestion to Eve. It was a suggestive language. It was subtle, but it was suggestive, and it brought her to a place that she perceived that the fruit was good to eat. And it is the same with us as men. I don't necessarily think that men have woken up and say, hey, you know what? I'm a man. I can do this. I don't believe that. I believe there was a message that was put out there deliberately. And us men, young boys, or our fathers and their fathers, and so on and so forth, they were given this message. They were given this message, much in the same fashion we were given on how that or we were told that men provide. And interesting enough, and yes, men are providers, and I get that. But interesting enough, this past week, I heard someone on TikTok say or share this message differently. Because in the garden, and then I believe this is going to take a lot of weight off of us as men, because ultimately, and not just men, but ultimately, I believe a lot of us are are living our lives out of the views of society. And so in turn, society has become our God, our go-to. Let me look at what the rest of the world is doing. Let me look at what the rest of the world is saying. What does this group of people say about XYZ? What does this group of people? Hey, Henry, thank you for joining over on LinkedIn. Appreciate you. Excuse me. So ultimately, I believe that we're living out a purpose or destiny that society has created for us. And interesting enough, I believe also that most of us, if not a large part of the world, has garnered or grabbed their idea of what love is from the likes of cinema, from the likes of the movies, from the likes of television, the likes of different television shows. And I think well before any of us have known what love is, we begin to express that in the way that television has shown us. And most of us have come from homes that are dysfunctional, unfortunately, myself included. And because we've come from homes that are dysfunctional, it is certainly a travesty. But because we have come from homes that's dysfunctional, we inevitably have found ourselves trying to find a way out of that place. And so naturally, what happens? We look to everyone else outside of our current condition. And in most cases, that current condition, or at least outside of that current condition, was media. And this is why media is so powerful, because media is, in most cases, it tells a picture. It sets the stage on how we should show love. It has set the stage on how fathers should show up, how men should show up. It has set the stage on how women should show up, not only in how they should take care of their families, but it's media has set the stage on how women should be as mothers, how men should be as fathers. And unfortunately, this is the challenge that we're dealing with. And so society has conditioned not only the women, but society obviously has conditioned the men. It's the men. And as I stated earlier, this is something that was given to us. I believe. Again, as I stated moments ago, I don't believe that we as men have woken up and say, "Hey, I'm a man," or our fathers woke up and say, "I'm a man." I think that we as men, who were given certain responsibilities, we were without certain knowledge. We were without the knowledge. And unfortunately, no, not much different from what had taken place in the garden with Eve. She was deceived, and men were deceived. We were deceived in believing that, as I started to share the story, believing that this information that I discovered on TikTok, but as we were as we were also deceived, believing that we were also to be the providers, when in fact God provides. And I believe in it. And as I stated earlier, I believe this is the thing that's going to offload a lot of weight from us as men, because far too long we've been trying to take on the role of, I believe, God. We've been trying to take on that role, and when the things don't line up, and then you may have heard me share in different conversations, I believe so much of what men are dealing with, or not choosing not to deal with, it is about alignment. It is a spiritual thing, and we are spiritual beings. acting out our lives or living out our lives the most natural ways as possible. But we are, by and large, spiritual human beings, and because a person does not believe that does not mean that it's not true. And I think because many of us don't understand or have gathered our information from erroneous uh, sources, I should say, we have as men lived out of a space that keeps us invisible. Because for us as men, oftentimes it is difficult for us to share that we're hurting. It's difficult to share that we've gone through certain things. Just case in point, many years ago, this is my wife before. We had been going through some things, and I had remember I was talking to my aunt, and I was typically known, you talking with my family, most people could tell you, my family or family members could share with you that Curtis is pretty tough, pretty, at least I believed myself to be pretty tough. But this particular day, I was talking with family members and just having a casual conversation. But had been at my aunt's house because me and my wife at the time we were having some issues, and so I was like, "Well, let me hang out over here to prevent any other kind of just stuff from just happening or whatever. So let me hang out at my aunt's house." And so here's the situation where I'm at my aunt's house and we're having a conversation, and out of nowhere, and this is the truth, man. Out of nowhere, here I am talking with my aunt, and I paused for a moment. They were talking, and I can remember hearing them talk, but not necessarily making what they were saying. But in my mind, I heard womp 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 womp, because in my mind, I mean, that's in my ears, that's what I was hearing. But in my mind, I was on a whole different plane, and all of a sudden, what came out of my mouth was, "She hurt me." Those were the exact words, and the tears came down my face. And I remember I just I went to that place, and all of a sudden I snapped out of it, and I was like, oh, and I it was just I for a moment I lost my composure. That's what I would probably say. I think it's a good word. I lost my composure, and I began to share a story that I was hurt, that she hurt me. And oftentimes for us as men, that may not necessarily be your story as men, but it is a story for a lot of us that we've been hurting through relationships. We've been hurt by our mothers. A lot of us have been hurt by the people who love us. And I think that for us as men and women too, we gather our confidence. A man gathers his confidence from his father. A young girl gets her confidence from her father as well. And when the men don't show up, when we as men don't show up within our children's lives, or when we have not been able to, when we don't know what that confidence looks like for ourselves, unfortunately. Hey, Natalie, thank you for joining over on LinkedIn. Appreciate you. Thank you, guys. Hey, make sure you leave some comments. Let's talk about this. Let's dive in. I know it kind of feels like I'm teaching, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. But I want to hear what you have to say, guys. So if you got any comments to share about this conversation, this topic, in regards to men hurting, if you got a loved one, leave a comment. Let's talk about this thing, guys, because this is a serious matter. This is a serious matter. Thank you, Natalie, for sharing it out. Appreciate you. Absolutely. Thank you. So, as I was saying, is that oftentimes we as men we're kind of lost my train of thought. Apologize, but we as men we're dealing with different things that make it difficult for us to communicate, and a lot of times it's not. We can be looking at that direct situation. Perhaps a father is not able to or having issues with communicating with his wife, or dealing with the children. Ideally, come on now, and I think what we need to kind of think about this, because if the man is having issues with communicating with his fathers, we know the situation in most cases, it did not just pop up. It did not just pop up. That means that the situation was already there. And by most cases, by and large, most cases, that the situation was there even with his father, even with his father and his father. And so what happens is that this, this, this behavior, it continues to perpetuate itself. And then naturally it spills over into how the father communicates with his son, how the father communicates with his daughter. So what happens is that it's not just the sons who are missing out. The entire family is is missing out on an opportunity to for a healthy relationship. And for us to think that, hey, this is just a man problem, we're sadly mistaken. We're sadly mistaken. And me coming from this place is not about me knowing everything, but it's about me having to have experienced certain things, and I'm able to share that experience with you. So even in my own household, I'm still making adjustments, guys. This is going to be, I don't know necessarily forever learning experience, but still making adjustments. And I believe that's a good thing, because what happens is that when we find ourselves settling in that space and coming to a place where we're not willing to change, I think that's when the mayhem has a tendency to gather its friends and cause all kinds of problems. But when we're on the edge of desiring to change, to be better men, to be better husbands, we can we can be prepared to receive different information, new information. This is a journey, men. And it's important for us, the women, to understand this. All too long, it has been a message that has been given not only to the men, that boys don't cry, men don't do this, men don't do this, men don't do this, men don't do this. In ways, guys, I'm guilty of that too. I've said certain things to my son as well. And I'm not letting myself off the hook by any stretch of the imagination. But to understand that we need to have these conversations, because men all over the world are offing themselves. And it can be for various different reasons, guys. Various different reasons. And it's a lot, man. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. You have the term they use, misogyny, misandry, the men who hate women, the women who hate men. And it's a lot, man. It is a lot. And this, unfortunately, this even goes on in marriages. It's a lot, guys. It's a lot. And I think it's so important for us as families to do what we need to do to continue to keep those connections. There's a scripture in the Bible that says that, and this is not verbatim, so I apologize, but it says, "Men, love your wives," and I could mess this up a little bit, but men, love your wives as Christ loved the church. That's not always easy for us as men. That's not always easy, especially. Um, Thank you for commenting, Sharito. Give me 1 second. I'll get to your comment in just a second here. That's not always easy, because the Bible says, "Men, love your wives as Christ loved the church, and he laid down his life." So that means that as men, we have to constantly, consistently be prepared to lay down our lives. And this laying down our lives mean that lay down our own desires and how this thing should finish, how the outcome should look. Lay down our own desires. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're saying, oh, my wife is right all the time. It doesn't mean that. It means that we have to be prepared as men to find another way to solve that issue. We have to be prepared to find another way, because that very moment, and however that issue may arise, us men have to consistently be prepared to lay down our lives. And I'm going to be very, very frank with you. Even when me and my wife have our disagreements, I too have to be prepared to lay down my life. I cannot necessarily allow her to take initiative and to see that she's going to look at it from a different angle. I don't always do that. But sometimes I don't feel like doing that. Sometimes even for me, my ego arises and I want to be right. But if I'm going to do this the right way, I have to be prepared to lay down my life. Meaning that I'm looking at this from a spiritual perspective. I'm looking into avenues on how to gather the pieces and present a plan or present a option that's going to smooth the road out. Because men and women are absolutely wired different. And that's just the way it is. We're wired differently. Hey, Jackie, thank you for joining over on LinkedIn. Appreciate you. Sharito over on LinkedIn says, nowadays in my country, men can cry without being ashamed because we people, or most of us, understand why men laugh or why men laugh or cries. Let's see here. We laugh loud with them and in happy occasions, and we cry with them in sad occasions. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, us men need that, and that is just the reality. Us men need that. We need allies in this world, guys. This is not easy. This is not easy. There are things that we have to, as men, that we're thinking about. That as a father, I've got my 2-year old. One of my biggest concerns is that my daughter is protected. From a father, from a man's perspective, is that when that time comes for my daughter to get married, date someone, to get married, is that she is protected. And that is a reality. And oftentimes, and especially here in the States, hey, thank you, Brother Wayne. Thanks for joining, man. Appreciate you. Oftentimes in the States here, because there are different laws that protect women, and that's wonderful. But a lot of times, because women feel, I believe that women feel that they're so protected by the laws that they don't need the men. And and in most cases, that's so crazy to me. That's so crazy to me. It's like a child being born to the mother and saying, "Mom, I don't need you anymore. Dad, I don't need you anymore." And there's a level of protection that men offer, or that come with the territory. That's just who we are. We're protectors. We're providers. And it is important for us to understand that. And we can't keep allowing society to take those things away from us, to tell us that we are less than that. And obviously a lot more goes into just being a provider and being protectors. It's looking at the bigger picture. Looking at the bigger picture, and that's just the way it is, because we men, we know, as most of us as men, we know how tough it is out there. This world is a unforgiving world. We live in a unforgiving world, and just because you're protected doesn't mean that you're going to walk in the middle of the street with a helmet on. You got something to protect your head, doesn't mean that you should walk in the middle of the street with a helmet on. And it's just what it is, guys. Just what it is, and that's just my take on it. So all right. So Natalie is wishing or hoping that Sharita's doing well over on LinkedIn. Again, thank you, Jackie, for joining. Good evening to you. And Wayne says, yes, sir, the greatest battle is with self. Not easy to love self if we experience neglect, abuse, blame early in our lives. Absolutely. Well said, brother. Well said, brother. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a major, major piece. It is difficult for us to love ourselves if we have not grabbed hold of it. And I'm not saying it's impossible. Not saying that it's impossible. Not saying that it cannot be done. But it is difficult become to love ourselves and to take care of ourselves in a loving way, and that when we're doing those things, it's going to spill off, and the caring and the nurturing part, that part's going to spill off and taking care of other people. And when we have not received those things, just as Wayne had stated so nicely, when we have not received those things, it becomes very, very difficult to garner those things, to take hold of those things from a from uh, from the world, when you have not gotten it from home, when we haven't received it from home. A powerful statement, a powerful share, Wayne. Thank you, brother. Let's see. So back to our story. So naturally, there is a script that and as I stated earlier, there's a script that society has given us. And this is not, I want you to really catch this from a spiritual perspective, guys. And I don't know how else to say this, but to say it the way I'm going to say it is that we are spiritual beings. And when we get away from the spiritual component, when we move so far away from the spiritual component of the spirituality piece of it, and who we are, the very essence of who we are, we lose the potency. We become impotent, so to speak, if I could use that word. We become less effective, because the reality of all of this is that we were born to serve a purpose. So society, media, essentially, I mean, and I'm not against media. I'm saying, because this right here is media. I'm sharing this conversation with you over media. So I'm not against media. I'm just saying is that we have to be careful on how and where we are receiving our information, because the whole purpose of these different sayings that men are this, women are this, the whole point of it is to divide, ladies and gentlemen. The whole point of these conversations is to divide. And if we can if we can keep families divided, if we can keep the husbands arguing with the wives arguing with the husbands, men don't know who they are. They have not come into a greater understanding of who they are. And this is not a bashing for men, because in most cases their fathers didn't know. I did not know at a time in my life. I didn't understand. But now, as time has gone by, I've come to understand. I've come to grow in a greater understanding. And so hence is why I'm here sharing this information with you all, is that for us men and the women who love us, that we would come into a greater understanding of who we are. Because when we can come, especially as men, when we can come into a greater understanding, as to who we are, we can serve our purpose much better. We can serve our purpose. Wayne over here on LinkedIn says, though on the flip side, in a patriarchal society, men are largely responsible for launching violence on women and should protect. Unfortunately, this makes women weary of the protectors. Absolutely, Wayne. Absolutely, and I would agree. I absolutely agree with you, Wayne, on that piece. But I would also say, Wayne, on that piece is that the men have not known their position. The men, even the men who are in high places, because remember, this was, as I believe, this was about control. Even through our governments, this was about control, I believe. And so naturally, with the men without the knowledge, they become the fathers, and they're raising children without the knowledge, and or the young boys who don't know how to become protectors, who eventually might have their own families, but they're raising their young boys. And so I believe I believe it was by design. Absolutely was by design. But the spiritual component of it is, I believe, that this division was done purposely, and we have to understand that. And again, I don't know how to say it any other way, other than we have to look at what was given to us. We have to examine what was given to us. We have to examine certain things. We have to examine things that people are saying. We have to use discernment to what people are saying. There are a lot of different posts that I might see, and you may see, on, well, either LinkedIn or different social media platforms. There are all kinds of different posts that we might see. But there are times when I might read a post, and I'm quick to maybe even like a particular post, or heart it, or give it a thumbs up. And there are times where I say, wait a minute, I might have to think about certain things, because I don't want to sign on for certain things that people are saying. And now those things are just making their way through my own psyche. And so we have to be careful on what sounds good, what looks good, and be able to discern certain things. Because rest assured, there is a truth out here. There is a truth. There is a truth. There is a truth, folks. I'll say that again. There is a truth. There is a truth. Some people might look at it from different perspectives and saying, hey, there's more than one truth. And that could be, there's more than one truth. And I believe ultimately there's a truth that's going to set us free. There's a truth that's going to set us free. There's a truth that's going to take the wrestle and the dysfunction that we're dealing with, guys. There's a truth. And I believe part of that truth is that we were all created equal. We were created by God. And obviously, people, for different reasons, they may not believe in God, and that's completely their prerogative. But the flip side of that, when we don't believe that we're equal, or to man and to a husband and wife, or to a man and to a woman, when we don't believe that we're equal, and I say equal, I mean that we have a purpose to be here. There's a purpose in all of us. And for me, my wife is not less than me. I'm not more than her. I'm not more than she is. Though we have different responsibilities, share different responsibilities in our household, within our marriage, uh, we are different, but equal, all part of the same goal, so to speak, all part of uh, the same objective, if you will. And I believe that's the way it should be. There's an objective now. And when we're not part of the same objective, being that I think that's where the disparity comes in. When we're not on the same page, whereas that someone is listening over here, and yet someone is listening to something completely different over here. And ultimately, it drives division. It drives division. This is the whole goal of this thing. So Jackie says over here on LinkedIn, let me see if there's any comments here. Hey, Marcia, thank you for joining over on YouTube. I apologize. Normally you are over here on LinkedIn, so maybe I can officially say that you are now on YouTube. So thank you, Marcia, for joining us over on YouTube. Hope you're doing well. So Jackie over here on LinkedIn says, oh, thank you. Yes, Marcia says this should be a great episode. Thank you. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this. Thank you very much. So Jackie says here on LinkedIn says, so tired of us being divided. Let's all be caring human beings and not blame by gender. Absolutely. I Jackie, I love that. I love that share, Jackie. I really do. I think it's wonderful, but I think unfortunately people aren't necessarily willing to. It's hard to, and it's kind of like what Wayne shared earlier is that when men have not people have not where did he say it at there? When people have not experienced love and care and things of that nature and compassion and relationships prior to leaving home, or if that has not been their experience in most cases, it's hard for these people, individuals, to take hold of love outside of that, because I believe that love is the foundation. Love is absolutely the foundation, but that foundation starts within the confines of our home through our parents. And naturally, when we don't have that love coming from our parents, and again, this is not to blame our parents, but when we don't have that aspect of our relationship coming from, or that aspect of humanity coming from our parents, uh, it doesn't easily show up. It can absolutely become a gender war. And that's exactly what we're dealing with, because I don't think there are enough people who have absolutely taken part in this, and so or at least being able to experience humanity from a space of love, of care, or being nurtured properly. And no person is perfect. Absolutely get that, but again, on the flip side of our imperfections is the gender wars that will show up, because the men aren't getting something and the women aren't getting something. And whether these things are true or society has given us these different things, that's a whole nother story. And that's why we should have these conversations, because we do need to peel back the layers of this stuff, because society right now, I believe, they're running our relationships, and it's the different views of society. They are they're at the they're at the wheel. They're driving our relationships, and unfortunately, it has disconnected us from the higher source that we were all created from, and now we're out of alignment. And so naturally, if we didn't get those things from home, it's very, very difficult to pick up these things outside of home, because guess what? We don't trust people. We don't trust people. Natalie says at Curtis Brooks, what are your reflections about the culture of sharing fairy tales when we are young? How these things go against preparing us for adulthood and managing real relationships and problems? Do you think our delusionment is a factor? Hmm. That's a great question, Natalie. Great question. I think I think stories. I'll put it that way. Stories in itself. Stories are a part of life. I think stories are absolutely essential to life and to the places and the things that we will see and experience. Stories are absolutely important. But I think the challenge is that, to your use of words, fairy tales. I think the challenge is that most of us have been given the fairy tale, and unfortunately, uh, the fairy tales oftentimes are without certain principles, or garnering certain principles to live by, unfortunately. And because those principles are not the foundation of those stories, if you will, or those fairy tales, uh, it it gives us a obscure vision of what life looks like. So yeah, there's absolutely, to your question, I believe there definitely is a factor in us being in a life of being disillusioned, for sure, absolutely, because the stories themselves, there's really no merit to them, in order to really to just obscure our view on what we can really expect from life, such as Eve in the garden. And again, people say, "Oh, well, that's just a story," but the reality of it is that that story was given to her to obscure her view or her perspective. And so once it did that, she then perhaps fell in love with a story that was given to her, and she did give some to her husband. So they essentially fell into a story that wasn't true. That wasn't true. So there's absolutely a lot of truth to what you're saying, Natalie. So thank you for sharing that. Michael says, "Hey, Michael, thank you for joining, man." Michael says, "You're right on point, Curtis. I'm reminded of the verse that says, 'Let us do our first works over again. Humility is the key.'" Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And again, humility is the key. But guess what? It takes it can take a lifetime to get to that humility, because guess what? You have to lay down your life for, excuse me, excuse me. You have to lay down your life for this humility. In order to take hold of humility, you have to lay down your life for it. You have to lay down your life for compassion. You have to lay down your life for love, because there are a lot of things in this life that will come absolutely to challenge love. And we have to be prepared to lay down our lives in order to see it. That means that we have to examine certain things. We have to be prepared to examine, be able to discern certain things. Wayne says, "Hey, Michael, over on LinkedIn." Sharito says, "Sometimes I think that it's men's fault being known that way due to egos. Nobody can make or unmake you if you don't allow it." This is good, Sharito. I like this. I love this right here. So Sharito goes on to say, "Why not stand up and let it be known to the world that you are human beings and God made us all equal, even in the emotions, both experience every emotion is known to man." Absolutely. Sharito, I do agree with you. You're speaking a lot of truth there. Again, as I stated earlier, I don't know if you were here when I said this, is that I believe there has been a greater purpose. There has been a greater purpose, and that purpose has ultimately been to cause division. That purpose has been to cause division. And if we can cause division, we can cause people to be scattered. We can cause gender wars. We can cause the feminists to say this, and to the men to say this about the women to say this about the men. All these different things. So here, yeah, it absolutely looks like the men are to blame. But I'm going to take it a step further and say that the men haven't always known themselves. And without the knowledge, absolutely, yeah, it absolutely can look like it's the men's fault. But they themselves did not know. And I know it's hard to believe, because in most cases, we want to know, we want to find someone to blame. Oh, it's the man's fault. It's the man's fault. It's the man's fault. It's the man's fault. So I do appreciate what you're saying, Sharito. I think that's a powerful statement. So thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. So it can absolutely look like it's the man's fault. But the man, in most cases, for the men who have made a lot of the decisions, it's not me who's made the decision, but men as a whole. So it can be almost feel like we're fighting someone that's invisible. And I know, yes, we do live in a patriarchal world, but the reality of it is that just because they're making decisions doesn't mean it's the right decisions. And so ultimately, yes, we have had to live by certain decisions that men have made. Myself included, and many of the men here who are listening or who will watch the replay, we all have had to live by other men's decisions. But if you know on a deeper level that the world in itself, they're not this world in itself is not led by a democracy. That's the reality. It's led by people who are wanting to control. And this is not to get into any kind of conspiracy, but I just want us to understand this from a spiritual perspective, when we're constantly bickering with each other, men and women alike, there is no growth, there is no progress. You can't come into the inheritance that God has promised us with the bickering and fighting and the arguing. You can only come into missed opportunities one after the other with the bickering and fighting. You can't build in a time of war. It's nearly impossible to build in war. So, what would happen if our households could experience peace? What could happen if our households could experience peace? Natalie over here on LinkedIn says, we end up programmed via the stimuli we are exposed to. Books, videos, and other types of media and powerful tools. Throughout the decades, violence has been glamorized. Absolutely, Natalie. Absolutely. Uh, Violence has been glamorized through the media. Looking around us, I see the outcome every day. Absolutely. And this is the point. This is absolutely well said, Natalie. That is the point, is that oftentimes, even for myself, there are times where I might be sitting, reading a book, or maybe watching something, or just maybe sitting in a peaceful moment. And guess what? Weird thought might pop up in my head. Something I may not even haven't even been thinking about, but a weird thought will pop up in my head. And I'm sharing this because I want you to understand is that we have to deal with the thoughts that challenge us. We have to deal with the thoughts that challenge us. And ultimately, it's the that thought life that we sometimes participate in that ends up being toxic. And when men don't share certain things, talk about certain things, offload certain things that they're dealing with, the thoughts themselves have nowhere else to go. And eventually, I think I shared this last week, a door is open. Guys, this stuff is absolutely real. Spiritually, from a spiritual perspective, a door is open. And when a door is open, over a period of time, it picks up all these little amps, or however you want to say it. It picks up all these little micro imps or amps that will build on and add to the burden that we're already carrying. And so naturally, those toxic thoughts that are just circulating, they get heavier, they get heavier, and they get heavier to the point where we have to offload those things. Naturally, we have to offload those things. And for us as men, they show up potentially in how we communicate with our spouse, how we communicate with our children, how we communicate with people in life, how we do life, and to the point where it causes us to not do the things that we've desired to do. It causes us to cut ourselves off from life because the load gets so heavy sometimes. The load gets heavy, gentlemen. And we have to be prepared to ask ourselves, how do I see myself? How do I see myself without judgment? As men, we have to be prepared to look in the mirror, whether you're looking in a physical mirror or figuratively speaking, we have to be prepared to say, how do I see myself? Who am I to me? Because rest assured, our mothers have a version of how they see us or who we are to them. Our siblings, brothers and sisters, our wife has a idea of how she sees us or how we see ourselves. Excuse me, a reflection of how we see ourselves in the eyes of our spouse or our significant other. There's a reflection that comes back to us. And we as men, we have to be prepared to ask that question. How do we see ourselves? In most cases, I would believe, I would even step out on a limb here and say we see ourselves through the eyes of society, unfortunately. We see ourselves through the eyes of society. And when society has had enough of us, including the laws that have been changed to that feel like they're against us, when society has had enough of us, they pull the carpet out from under us. And if that doesn't cause disparity and hurt and pain and rejection and potentially depression and all these different things, I don't know what does. So the remedy for that is, I believe, is to get to know yourself. Get to know yourself. That's what I believe the remedy for this is. Understanding that your pain is, for us as men, understanding that our pain is not invisible. Yes, it might absolutely feel like it's invisible. Absolutely. But and I'll be very honest with you, I have no better joy than to be able to connect with my men friends and offload some different things and just, hey, just chop it up for a while and just have some good conversations, whatever the case might be, and talk about different things, talk about life, talk about pains and woes and challenges that we as men deal with, and not allow society to make you feel that you are not needed. And perhaps us as men, we've heard this before, but until we as men individually can come to a place where we matter, it can be very, very difficult to to show up, to show up in life each day from one day to another. It can be difficult showing up from one day to another. It can be difficult waking up, getting out of bed, showing up, going to that job that you may have asked for. You may have actually desired that job. You may have prayed for that job. But life has a tendency to beat up on us sometimes. At least that's what it feels like. And ultimately, it feels that we're invisible. And I'm going to say this in all honesty, and in all honesty, is that um, we as men, we've got to be prepared to step out and ask for the help. Ask for the help. There are just a ton of different coaches, either on LinkedIn platform or just other platforms, or perhaps as men we know coaches um, who could help us in this area. Because if not, it can be fatal. Unfortunately, it can be fatal. Walking around as suffering and being made to feel like we're invisible. And I say the word made, and I think Sharito says in her comment earlier about what is it? Uh, about someone, about a person not allowing something. But here's the thing: as men or just people in general, if you don't know something, if we don't have a particular understanding of a certain thing, and yet someone else has understanding to another level or certain capacity, that person in many ways has the authority now because he or she understands. So because a person understands something or how something works, and yet another person does not understand it, the person who is without understanding can absolutely be placed in a place where he or she is feeling the pressure of the knowledge. They're feeling the pressure of the knowledge that's been applied to their situation. So, in fact, a person can be made to do something when you are without the knowledge. And it does not necessarily mean that someone is forcing us, but because we don't understand a certain thing. If I don't understand, I mean, there's a lot of things obviously that I don't understand, but and just in whole, just a lot of things that we all don't understand. But for the thing that we don't understand, and to try and apply that particular knowledge, even if we don't understand, we feel powerless. We feel without the power. And so we're, in most cases, have to go a different route. So no one is making us do anything, but because we don't have the knowledge of a certain thing, it can feel like we're made to do something or feel like, oh, well, no one can make you do anything. But the reality of it is that when we are without certain knowledge, it can feel like we're made to do something or we've allowed something to happen or we have the authority. You don't have the authority over anything, any of us. You don't have the authority over anything if you don't understand it. If you don't understand something, you cannot have the authority over it. That's just how it works. That's how the spiritual world works. If you don't understand how a thing works, you cannot take authority in that space. You can argue, you can fight, you can cry and say, why is this happening? Oh God, blah, 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 blah. You can do all those different things. But if you don't understand how a thing works, you and I or anyone else cannot take authority in that thing. And so it stands to reason how people can allow things to happen or feel like they were forced to do something because they are without understanding. This is just how it works, ladies and gentlemen. So I appreciate what you shared there, Sharito. Absolutely. Natalie says here over on LinkedIn, she says, another reflection from observation and meeting people from all over the world. Some cultures practice in ways different from social and political practices within the UK, US, and UE. In Europe, what does this mean? Hold on a second here. Let's get more comments. Uh, What does this mean for our perception if we apply this topic and place it within another social culture's environment? Is context important, or perhaps do we need to go more R&D, multiculturally and multilaterally? Excellent comment here, Natalie. Excellent comment. So I would say to that, Natalie, oftentimes the stories are shared in different perspectives from different angles and obviously different ways and different voices, people from different cultures from all over the world, as you stated. But the principle never changes, Natalie. The principle of a story never changes. If it's something that we are to draw from that story, the principles don't change. And I think you said something else nicely in regards to the fairy tales. uh, in regards to causing disillusionment, being disillusioned by the fairy tales, and the fairy tales themselves are without the principle. And so when a certain story or ideas and things of that nature When they're shared without the principle, absolutely it can be just, oh, whatever, just again appear to be like a fairy tale. So it doesn't matter where the story is told, the wisdom or the principle it supports it always. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. The principle doesn't change. It's just, again, how the people share the stories. And there are a lot of different stories that are shared throughout the world, obviously, at different platforms, different ways. But just because the story is shared in a certain way, it doesn't mean that the person understands the principle. It doesn't mean that they understand the principle because the story is shared in a different, or the story is shared by this person or another person, or by a woman, by whoever. It doesn't matter. If the person does not understand, you just have a story. But when you have a story when you have a story, its foundation has a principle, has life principles. You'll see the people who you share those stories with. You'll see those people grow by leaps and bounds because the story, again, its foundation has a principle. Its vines and its leaves, their nourishment, their food, their sustenance for these individuals. So when we share principles with people, that when we share stories with people that have that's very foundation, is a has is grounded in principle, you'll see people grow by leaps and bounds. That's why certain people in different ministries are growing because there are principles. When people connect with a coach or an individual who, I don't know, a coach or a mentor who can share these principles within the stories, these people are going to grow by leaps and bounds. But oftentimes it's the story, it's the fairy tales, as you have stated so nicely moments ago, Natalie, that we're missing. We're missing the principles in the stories. And that's an excellent word. They're fairy tales. They are, in fact, fairy tales. They have no substance to it. How many women know or see themselves as being the the Cinderella in every man's story, or every man the knight in shining armor in another woman's story? Do women just think that, hey, I'm just going to show up and be beautiful and life is going to be great? Do men show up and say, hey, honey, I'm here to protect you and things are going to be great? It doesn't work that way. But this is the story we've been told. And so ultimately, because we've been given the fairy tales, we've been given the story without the sustenance. We've been given the story without the principle. We can find ourselves, much like what the scripture says, the man who built his house upon a rock, or the man who built his house upon the sand. So I believe that is what we've been given, and we have to make that connection. We have to make that connection back to the source and to see ourselves made in the image of God. Made in the image of God. And when we see ourselves made in the image of God, we're high above the principalities. When I say principalities, meaning that those governing regions that have been created in all over the world. Some cities have poor communities in one area of town, and right on the other side of the wall, there's a rich community. So there are pockets of different principalities, governing areas throughout the country, or different regions that are ruled by different principalities. And because these areas are ruled by these different principalities, they're what they call I guess a spiritual language. We use the word strongholds. We use the word strongholds, and so yeah, and there's a lot more to that, but the reality is that in fact it is the strongholds in a lot of ways that keep people bound. And those strongholds are, and a lot of times, just the erroneous information that we receive throughout the course of life. Again, society's views, and we're like, well, who is this society? Who represents this society? Where is he? Where is she? And it makes it seem like we're fighting someone invisible, but in fact, it is a for lack of a better expression, but it is an invisible fight. It's about principalities that we're fighting against, words that are governing, different words that are governing certain spaces. Poverty governs certain spaces throughout different parts of the world, the countries that we live in, the different regions. Poverty governs these things. And poverty does not just show up, ladies and gentlemen. Poverty has to be established, ladies and gentlemen. Come on now. Get this, get this, get this. Poverty does not just show up on a person. It has to be established by someone else who understands certain things or views different or views knowledge from a different perspective, and they apply that knowledge. And once they apply that knowledge to the unknowing subject, he or she becomes subject to that knowledge. They become governed by that knowledge or the will of that information that has been put out there. The information, the principalities. The principalities are governing words over a particular area. Ladies and gentlemen, please understand this. These are spiritual matters that we are going up against. And even for us as men, as we are seeing ourselves sometimes invisible, know that we are not invisible. And we have to fight against that thing in order to get life back. That means that we have to, yeah, absolutely, Sharito. Natalie is sharing some great thoughts over there. Absolutely, over on LinkedIn, she's sharing some wonderful thoughts. So thank you, Natalie, for your engagement for sure. So naturally, like I said moments ago, it is the principalities in these different areas, different regions that are ruling or governing over certain areas. And in order to get out of that space, come out of that space, we as people have to be prepared to understand. We have to be prepared to submit ourselves to come under that thing so that we can understand. Because when we don't come under it, or at least submit ourselves to, so in order to understand a certain thing, we can feel like we're fighting something that we can't see. And us as men, we're fighting something that we can't see. We're fighting principalities that are working against us, unfortunately. And because oftentimes the women don't understand it either, they too are fighting against the principalities. And in most cases, helping to aid in the the aid in the situation or the outcomes. And this here was done purposely as well. And I don't mean to come from, or at least sound coming from a conspiracy kind of thing going on, but this is more spiritual than anything. It always has been. It always has been. That's why it's so important for us as men and women to be careful what we say, because the very words that we speak, they are in fact seeds. You've heard me speak on this probably a number of different times. The very words that we speak, they are seeds. And when they plant themselves, especially for us men or men and women alike who are dealing with anger, we may say certain things in the moment, in a heated moment. And though you may not have meant to say it, you've spoken certain things. I too have been there. We've spoken certain things in the heat of anger. And when we've spoken those certain things, we can find ourselves again planting that seed and not knowing how that seed is going to sprout up and choke the very life of the progress that we're trying to make here in our various relationships, whether it be on our job, whether it be with our significant other, whether it be with our spouse. The very seeds of anger show up. Thank you, Sharita. I appreciate that. Sharito says, here on LinkedIn, you give more understanding of men, Curtis. Thank you. I appreciate that, Sharito. Thank you. It is not without the work, Sharito. I promise you this, sister. It is not without the work, the pain, the tears, and all that stuff. It is absolutely work in this thing. Um, Natalie says here on LinkedIn, she says, do you think that when humans throughout the ages decide to, in their hubris, go against Mother's Nature designated systems and processes for their personal gain and self-proclaimed dominance over other species, that they give that they give that they give a piece of themselves away, and then this plays out in scenes you have so eloquently described, Chris Brooks. Great share, Natalie. I think, Natalie, the whole I think what you said is just so profound, Natalie. And I would say that uh, even in the Bible, it says that we were here to dominate, not dominate people, but dominate the things in the earth the things in the earth were subject to us. And because we don't understand that from a spiritual perspective, as I stated earlier, we have opened the door. The door has been opened to certain things. It was much in the same way. I don't mean to keep bringing this up, but much in the same way with Eve when she had eaten of the fruit, because she did not understand. This is a thing. It's through understanding that any of us, become fruitful. It's through understanding. And because people don't understand, they can perceive, you can be given anything, essentially, and think that like there were studies done with kids, how when you give a kid a dollar bill over four coins, so the kid would naturally thinking that the four coins, the four quarters, is more than the single dollar. I mean, even though they're the same, you give him four quarters, he says, wow. And you give him the dollar bill, he may choose the four quarters over the dollar, but they're the same. And just to say that you've given him you've given him 90 cents, all in dimes or nickels. This is from the States here. I know people from all over the different currency, but nevertheless, you give a child dimes, that represent 90 cents versus a dollar bill. The chances that that child would take the nine dimes over the dollar bill is pretty high, because he thinks that the 90 cents represents more than the dollar, when in fact it doesn't, obviously, but that's just our perception. So I think through that perception, because we don't understand a child again, I know it's from a very simplified understanding or simplified share, but the reality of it is that we, even as adults, don't understand the spiritual significance of certain things. And so here comes the serpent speaking to Eve in a way where it was all twisted up. And though she didn't understand, she ended up giving the entire, or partaking in something that she was told not to partake of. And they both ended up giving the entire thing away, to the point where they were removed from the garden. So Yeah, there's absolutely truth into what you shared, Natalie. A lot of truth in this one, sister, because uh, we're created equal, but we were created to dominate the things in this earth, not dominate people, but dominate the things in this earth. And it doesn't mean that each person is going to know everything, but the mankind, if you will. One person has a greater study of psychology, then another person has a greater study of marine biology, or just getting different studies. So it doesn't mean that every person has to know everything, but it means that mankind would make those things subject to the point where we can understand, and we can understand certain things, and we can share that understanding and rule this world, not rule over each other, but bring those things that we didn't understand, make them subject to us. And so that we bring those things under authority. But as I stated earlier, you cannot put something under authority or bring something under authority if you don't understand. So I think that that is partly a huge problem that many of us are dealing with, especially as men and women alike. But when you don't understand certain things, you cannot bring them under authority. Marcia says here on YouTube, thank you, Marcia, for commenting over on YouTube. She says, old school society dictates too much about how men should operate, and it's not the real or ideal in today's dynamics because it just because if men just understood that their role is biblically, then they will grow. Absolutely, absolutely, Marcia. And yeah, I agree with you 100%, Marcia. I think it is important for us to understand that. But again, I think as the farther and farther men, or just men in general, especially with men, the farther and farther we get away from a biblical truth, we can find ourselves again being mesmerized with how those progenitors, I should say, present certain things to us. No different from what I just shared with you, uh, nine dimes over a dollar. So the person who doesn't understand, he takes the nine dimes and happily walks away with the nine dimes, believing that he has more. But in fact, obviously, the dollar was more. And I think this is what's been given to us because we don't understand from a biblical perspective that God has placed man on the earth to dominate, and for us to understand that we were made in his image and his like and after his likeness. And when we don't understand that, you cannot do anything but take second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place, sixth place, and eventually count yourself out. Woo, man, that's good stuff. If you don't understand who you are in Christ, and I mean this with every fiber of my bone, my body, when we don't understand who we are, and we're allowing society to dictate who we are, to as far as men, as far as women, consistently over and over and over, and then at some point we allow them to pull the carpet from out from under us, and then here we are as men, showing up less than, and offing ourselves, killing, destroying ourselves, unfortunately, and just doing, just offing ourselves, and we're leaving our families, and we're leaving our loved ones. Is this stuff hard? Absolutely, it is not easy. But when you have understanding, it is not easy, gentlemen. But when you have understanding, that's when you can overcome. There's a scripture in the Bible that says they overcame the devil by the word of their testimony and by the blood of the Lamb. So there's something with understanding. When we can get understanding, we can overcome, gentlemen. When you can get understanding of who you are in Christ Jesus, who you are. And I know there's going to be a lot of people say, well, the Bible was written this way, was written this way. That might be true. A lot of that is probably true. I'm not doubting that. Someone could say the Bible is written in a way that to control men and control people. A lot of that's true. I believe that. But sometimes in life, you got to chew the meat and spit out the bones. You got to chew the meat up and spit out the bones. And this is life, guys, for all of us. And that's why it's so important to talk with someone, have these conversations with people who are more knowledgeable. Seek help, gentlemen. Seek help. Go seek the help, gentlemen. You are not alone. Every single last one of us as men, it doesn't matter what your economic status is, every single last one of us as men have dealt with the disparity in life, the challenges in life. Every last one of us, gentlemen, we have dealt with it. And if a man tells you he has not, he is lying to you. If a man tells you he has not dealt with certain things, he is lying to you. I get it. We have different lifestyles. We've come up from different economic backgrounds. I get it. But life has a way to present itself that if you are in this world, you're going to get it. It doesn't matter what your economic status is. If you are living in this world, you're going to be dealing with something. Marcia says over here on LinkedIn, Eve didn't understand the assignment because there may not have been, excuse me, proper communication and direction from Adam's why she or she took the fruit. Yeah, man, Marcia, that could be a lot of truth to that. And again, I think shared last time. I think Eve was absolutely aware of it, but and again, this is not against women. This is not a picking on women, but I think this is just a story that shows us that the devil is slick. He is slick. He is slick. So it's not a this conversation and not to say that you're implying this, but I just want to just state this is that this conversation is not about blaming women or men, but it is to help us to understand the psychology behind this here. It is spiritual, guys. And though many of us may have different levels of education, and I respect it absolutely, but understand as we move our way throughout life, there is a wisdom that even we pick up from the world through our education. So I'm asking us men and women alike to stop for a moment, to pause, take a pause, and begin to question certain things. Because if God is perfect, you were created his likeness and his image, or after his image. What does that say about you? Your daddy is perfect. There was nothing missing from your daddy. You were only told it was missing. This is the message you were given. Even in a court of law. Now, this is what man has been doing forever. Even in a court of law, the person can be guilty as all outdoors. But if the opposition can prove with a reasonable doubt that the person is not guilty, and he can prove it through speculation. This is how this system works, ladies and gentlemen. So it's not one person fares over the other, one person is better. It's not about that. It's through understanding that people are being deceived. It's through understanding that people are being deceived, ladies and gentlemen. And when you don't understand, we are all subject to being deceived. Yes, we can say Adam was absolutely, he should have done better. He should have known better. But I do believe that God recognized the power that Eve had over her husband, that even God didn't have over over Adam. I believe that God recognized the power that Eve had over, that a woman had over a man. So I don't believe that it's not about blaming anyone. And Marcia, it's not about I'm not picking on you. I just want to just make sure that's clear. It's not about blaming woman or man. I think that from the beginning, there was a method, a motive to deceive. There was a motive to deceive. So there had to be something that Eve did not understand. And in her misunderstanding, and yet the power that she had over her husband, they were both now deceived. So I just want to make sure that's clear that again, we're not here to blame anyone, to say, you know, that's not the point of it. All right. Natalie says something about Pandora's box. She says, we open, this is over on LinkedIn. She says, we open Pandora's box when we begin to covet beyond what we need as necessary. Absolutely. Natalie, I completely agree with you. I think that was part of the fall, Natalie. Remember, from the beginning, there was nothing missing about you and I. There was nothing broken. So that means that this stuff had to be brought to us. It had to be given to you and I. If a man or woman is seeing themselves from a deficient state, if we are seeing ourselves from a deficient state, meaning that there's something that we are lacking, my suggestion would be is to read the word of God, where God says that he spoke and he created, that there was nothing missing, that he made you and I after his image and in his likeness. So I believe that has to do with character and integrity. But when Adam and Eve, when mankind had fallen, uh, it was they had fallen under a different authority. They had fallen under a different. They had now come under a different covenant now, and so this new covenant had an authority over them, whether they understood it or not. It represented something that they didn't understand. They had no authority in that space. But prior to falling, the Bible talks about Adam naming the animals and God standing right there to see what he would name the animals. So mankind had an authority in the garden. But when they had both eaten of the fruit, they had no idea what they were saying yes to, because now they're under a different covenant. Marcia says here, Marcia says here over on YouTube, she says, sometimes the power woman has is too strong that most men succumb to it and lose their masculinity or power and leadership skills. I'm not blaming us women, but we do take the power. Uh, we do take the power oftentimes. Absolutely, Marcia. Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely isn't. It definitely isn't a blame game. But what happens is that, and I completely agree with you. And this is oftentimes how a man loses his authority. He loses his authority from what you just shared, Marcia, is that he doesn't take his position, and he forgets his assignment. The man forgets the assignment because the woman yields a power over the man, and whether through looks, whether through just all kinds of different things. She does in fact yield the power over a man, but yet a man must bring those things under authority so that he does not allow himself to be brought out from that space, and that he remembers his assignment. So I love what you shared over there on the YouTube, Marcia. I love that. It's super powerful because I think that, yeah, very nicely said. Marcia says over on LinkedIn that was nicely said, Marcia, for what you shared. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that when a man loses his position, he has no other way, no other option other than to succumb to the woman, and that's not what God wanted. And because because Adam had succumbed to the woman, again, she yielded his power over him. Adam wanted to please her, and perhaps that's where the term comes, happy wife, happy life, where that comes from. I don't particularly care for that term, but that's what people say. Again, that's one of those things in life where we have to be prepared to just stop for a moment, pause, and take a look before we sign on to certain things. Because when we sign on to certain things, again, even if we're not saying them, we're reading them. When we sign onto these certain things, they can absolutely work their way in through the entire lump of dough, like yeast, so to speak, and become part of our new language, so to speak. And having to separate those things often is very difficult. So it is important for us men to know, as Marcia said, there's an assignment that God has given us, and when we as men don't know our purpose, we can easily find ourselves succumbing to the very fruit or the ideas that a woman may present to us, and following after that thing, uh, and putting that thing, which that assignment which God has given to us, uh, putting the woman over that assignment. And again, the Bible says that the woman has, not the woman, but that the enemy, the devil, has come to deceive the entire world. And guess what? He's going to use those things that yield power over us as men. And a quick story here. This has been a great conversation, guys. Thank you for the engagement over here. This has been a great conversation. I remember a couple of years ago, me and my wife she had just gotten a new job, and we were looking into moving from one apartment to another apartment. And we had been believing God for it, and I had been praying and things of that nature. And so this particular day, she had come in and said something to me about, oh well, about that move. And she said, she didn't say God, she said, well, something told me. And I said, wait a minute. And I immediately, I had to pause. I said, wait a minute, did God tell you that? That's what I told her. And I'm looking at her just like this, almost kind of like a I'll be honest with you, almost kind of confrontational space. I was just like, wait a minute, did God tell you that? That's what I asked her. And she goes, well, no, God didn't tell me. And I immediately said, well, if God didn't tell you, there's no conversation about it. We don't have nothing to talk about. Because in my mind, to be honest, I said some other things too. I was pretty upset. I said, no, I'm not going to eat on that fruit. God didn't tell me that. I didn't hear that. We're coming in agreement on a certain thing, and that's what we're going to stand on. So my point in sharing that with you is that as men, we have to be mindful. We have to be prepared to again discern certain things. And again, this is how the enemy does. The thoughts that pop up in all our heads at different times in our minds, and they're not ours, but we have to be prepared to dismantle that thinking. Uh, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God, through the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that would exalt itself against the knowledge of God, bringing to captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ, and having in a readiness to revenge all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. So in that scripture, that's what I just shared with you. That is one of the scriptures that I say all the time. When the thoughts pop up in my mind and try to take over, and when I see and hear a thought that shows up in my ear, and where that thought in itself tries to plant itself. Hey, Christy, thank you for joining from Florida. Thank you for joining. Hope you're doing well. So when I have those different thoughts that pop up in my head and they just come out of nowhere, evil, sick, disgusting thoughts, when they pop up, that's the scripture I share. That scripture that I just shared with you, that just spoke, that's the scripture that I speak over in my heart. That's the scripture that hey, Jeremy, thank you for joining, man. I appreciate you. That's the scripture that I say out loud. That's the scriptures. Those are the scriptures that I read. I normally read scriptures. What is it? Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 31 each night before I go to bed. I've been doing that for the last, almost 2 years now. Through those scriptures, the confidence has grown tremendously in my life as a man. And again, I share this information with you not to come from a space that I'm better than anyone else. Absolutely not. But I can take authority over certain things now because of understanding. The reason why it feels like a certain things, or that we are under the weight of certain things as men and women included. The reason why we can feel overwhelmed a lot of times by certain things is because we haven't taken authority over that thing yet. And so we can find ourselves having to surrender to that thing. Years ago, many, many years ago, I had a really bad gambling habit. And I can share these things. I can be vulnerable with you because you need to see the holes in my hand. You need to see the imperfection, as Jeremy says here, amen to obedience, not perfection. Absolutely. You need to see the holes in my hand. Obviously not real holes, but the point of it is that you need to see and hear the humanity. But many years ago, I had a gambling habit, and it was bad. Not that I wasn't rich, but nevertheless, I had a gambling habit. And I had to overcome that thing. I overcome that thing with understanding because there was a deficiency in my life. And because I didn't understand, it was a burden that I was carrying. It was something that kept me invisible because I didn't understand. I couldn't fight against something I didn't understand. I couldn't go against that thing. I couldn't come out. I could dress for the occasion, but I wasn't effective. I can only walk in the part or walk in a space of, oh, he looks like he knows what he's doing. But because I was only geared up for the opportunity, lacking the knowledge, here I found myself going right back to that gambling habit until I had overcome it with the love of Christ. Because there was a deficiency in my life. Much to the men who may be listening or watch the replay, there's a deficiency. Something is missing. And for the women who don't understand, there's something missing also. There's a deficiency. And I think part of the gender war that we're dealing with is that there's something missing. And because there's something missing, we can find ourselves trying to take from the other person. Something, again, there's something that is trying to take from that other person that in fact is the Bible speaks of flesh, those fleshly desires. And that the flesh, from a spiritual perspective, the flesh has a insatiable desire that cannot be satisfied. It cannot be fulfilled. And so we just take people again from that low hanging fruit, from that spiritual low hanging fruit. People will just take and take and take and take and take from other people till they are absolutely left with nothing, until they have destroyed that person. And they're not done taking, because there's more land to, or land, I'm saying, so to speak, more souls to grab and more souls to destroy, because they're not under authority. They, in fact, don't have a purpose for their life. And when we as men are without understanding, we're walking without a true purpose, because there's only something of evil that would cause division. It's only something of evil that would cause division. Marcia says here over on YouTube, great scripture and roadmap, Curtis. Thank you, Marcia. Appreciate that. And Marcia says here over on YouTube, still, yes, men must take their place now. It's full time to lead. It's full time to lead based on the instruction from God. Absolutely, Marcia. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Absolutely. It is time. It is time. But again, we oftentimes we cannot take those spaces, especially if we're looking from the people, uh, and I'm just going to use myself as an example. If we as men, and or just women in general, if we're looking to the people, oh, Curtis, he's got locks, he's got long hair, he doesn't represent XYZ or whatever. Again, it can be a list of different things that people don't like about me, and that's okay. But it does not mean that the wisdom does not live here. I've said on different occasions, make sure when you go shopping, don't forget your shopping list. Don't forget what you've come to get in the midst of you going out on assignment. So people will dismiss people for different various reasons, and see, just because a person is in a high level or a high ranking establishment or authority, whatever, that these people know. And in most cases, they don't know. They don't know, ladies and gentlemen. And they are, and a lot of times these people have just oftentimes disconnected from God, and they're walking in their own strength. They're walking in their own understanding, and they're just putting this thing together as they go, as they move out to destroy mankind. And we don't want to put ourselves in that space, ladies and gentlemen. Hmm. So, with that being said, guys, I hope this conversation has been a blessing to you. I hope this conversation, that you guys have understood what I've shared with you, that this conversation was not about bashing men, not about bashing women, that we, in fact, are all created equal under the eyes of God. Under the eyes of God, operative word or words, under the eyes of God, we're all created equal. It's only it's only when it's under the eyes of mankind, unfortunately, and our degenerative thinking, that we're not created equal. And when we continuously look at our humanity through the eyes of a fallen man, through the eyes, when I say fallen man, I'm not speaking of just men, but humanity, a mankind that has fallen. When we find ourselves consistently looking through the eyes of our humanity and trying to clothe ourselves with such understanding, uh, you're welcome, Jeremy. Thank you. Jeremy says, Curtis, thank you for the equal exchange. Appreciate you, Jeremy. Absolutely, man. Thank you, sir. So we find ourselves trying to clothe ourselves in the garment of society, so to speak. We can find ourselves missing the mark and trying to please the society views or the wisdom society has put together or created under the guise of manipulation. That's what all this has been about, ladies and gentlemen, is that manipulation is at work here. That's what all this has been about. And when we don't understand our rightful places as men and women, as men, especially taking care of our households and managing the things that God has given to us, being able to love our wives as Christ loved the church and laid his life down for the church, that's what's going to take movement in here. This thing is a love walk. And I get it. It's not easy. It's not always easy. It's not always easy. But ultimately, this thing is about a love walk. Jeremy says, well, let's read it. Natalie says over to Jeremy, men need to cry. They are human too. Perhaps if men made safer spaces for each other, and some women did not emasculate them, men emasculate them when they show up healthy emotions and cry, the world would be a much safer and peaceful place. Men's repression and impact of this can be imagined via a volcano magma slowly churning, then suddenly an explosion, chaos, destruction, desolation in its wake. Absolutely, Natalie. Very nice. Very nicely said, Natalie. Very nicely said. Yeah, we are. When we are out of alignment, ladies and gentlemen, as men, we are absolutely, as Natalie described it here, that that volcano who is waiting for its moment, unfortunately, who is without understanding and just waiting for a moment or something to be triggered. Uh, in that volcano, that's going to just cause a fatal explosion, or and again, this is us as men, so it is important for us as to take our rightful places, to know that we are in fact created in the image and the likeness of God, and that's not me saying that. It is something that you and I have the opportunity to read and find out and discover for ourselves that that's where your confidence is going to come. Because as Wayne said it earlier, in his share earlier, one of our uh, viewers here on LinkedIn, is that if you have not been able to garner love, compassion, and things of that nature that make us up as human beings, the humanity part of us, caring and nurturing, that nurturing part, if you have not been able to garner those things from home as a child, it's going to be very, very difficult to garner those things outside of that space, outside of that safe space which home was supposed to be. It's going to be very difficult to take hold of those things outside of that safe space, and very difficult to trust someone with that, and it's just going to be very, very difficult to take hold of that, and to believe that you are loved, to know that you're loved, to wear that love like a garment, and to be able to share that love, because ultimately a person is trying to find out who they are. So that being said, guys, I don't want to keep going and make it sound like I'm rambling here, but it has absolutely been a pleasure, guys, and I hope this information has been a blessing to you. I hope that each of you have learned something. I'm learning something from you as well as I'm reading the comments. Let's see, make sure that. Okay. Make sure I want to read this last comment here. Marcia says over here on YouTube, it's not how the messenger looks, but we have to listen to the message. Absolutely. Yeah. All too often, people are distracted by the messenger, and, and, for various reasons. And when they miss the opportunity to get the principles or the message, I should say, they miss the opportunity to make those necessary changes in life, which are absolutely waiting for them. But yeah, I believe that change is absolutely waiting for all of us if we will take hold of it. But unfortunately, sometimes the change, how people see it in their own eyes, the change has to look a certain way, and he or she has to dress a certain way, and The Bible doesn't speak of Jesus having a bunch of degrees and things of that nature. It doesn't speak of that, but he had the knowledge, he had the wisdom, he had the principles behind the understanding, and that's what opened the doors. That's what the healing came from. The healing came from the principles, the understanding, and things of that nature. But nevertheless, guys, it has absolutely been a wonderful opportunity to be here before you. Jeremy, thank you, man, for sharing, for showing up again. Appreciate your input, man. Uh, Jeremy says over here on LinkedIn, powerful Curtis. So again, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Natalie, for your engagement. Appreciate you, sister. Thank you, Christy D. Williams, for showing up. Thank you, Sharito. Always a blessing to have you here, Sharito. Always. Let's see here. We got, thank you, Wayne, my brother Wayne, my good buddy Wayne. Thank you for showing up as well. I mentioned Christy. Thank you, Marcia, over on YouTube. Always showing up, very faithful. Thank you, Marcia. And thank you for those who are watching that I may not see. I mentioned Wayne. Thank you, Michael Rivers, my partner in crime. Thank you, sir, for showing up. Thank you, Jackie Hallberg, for showing up. Appreciate you. And let's see. And all those, as I mentioned earlier, who thank you, Henry. Henry was here as well. Thank you, Kelly, dear friend Kelly, with your powerful prayers each night during the third watch. Thank you for showing up. Thank you, Ileana. Thank you. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. And thank you, Allison, all each for showing up, guys. We really appreciate you for engaging, for making this a great conversation. Got a few more comments. And thank you to my wife. My wife says a great show. So thank you, babe. Appreciate you for that. Um, Natalie says, thank you, Curtis, for amazingly insightful and thoughtful, provoking event. Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate you very much. So thank you. So that being said, guys, I'm going to say goodbye. Well, you know what? Before I say goodbye, I'm going to put my information on this screen here so you know more about who I am and how you can reach out to me. So on screen here, guys, you see my information. So if you want to connect with me, if you are a man who is dealing with feeling like you've been suffering invisible, being invisible as you're suffering and going through challenges in life, know that you are not suffering. Let's connect, guys. Gentlemen, let's have a conversation. And you can reach me by the link on the screen. That's going to be bit.ly/free 30-minute coaching. Again, that is bit.ly free 30-minute coaching. So connect with me there, guys. Would love to have a conversation with you. Offload. So whether you are spending time, whether you want to work with me as a coach, it gives you a few moments, some time to offload some of the stuff off your chest. So even if we don't connect, guys, let's follow up with the phone calls, give you opportunity to uh, offload some stuff off your chest and just kind of let you know that you are not invisible. You are absolutely worth it, gentlemen. So to all my gentlemen, all the men who will watch this replay, I love you guys and take care of yourselves. Again, reach out to me by the link on the screen. That's bit.ly/free 30-minute coaching. And guys, we'll say goodbye for now. And we will talk with you later. Ciao for now. Bye bye.